Welcome everyone to the Kentucky Kid. As you know by now, my name is Kelly Berry. Thank you so much for joining me. As you may have noticed by now, you cannot see me. I am a magician. I have now figured out how to turn completely invisible and make everything that you see completely black, or whatever picture you're seeing right now. But no, in all actuality, we did not have camera access, and I actually had tried just a pure audio show, and I really loved it. I tried to upload it. I found out something weird about YouTube, and I guess it makes sense, but I just didn't realize this. You cannot upload pure audio files. And for those of you who are like me and don't know a lick about computers or anything, I'm just going to break this down really easy for you because this is the way it was explained to me, and it made sense without getting caught up in the technical garb, because I am probably the dumbest person ever when it comes to electronics, considering, you know, I'm a college student, I'm a male. Huge stereotype there that I don't have time to get into today. But anyway, basically, audio files have one file, and then, like, video files have another file. It's like your MP3 versus, you know, whatever your video file is it's saved under. I don't even know right now off the top of my head. So, anyway, kind of lost my train of thought there, but the point is, I tried it before, I loved it, I feel so much more natural when people can't see me, but at the same time, I almost feel like it's unfair because I'm robbing people the opportunity to see my amazingly gorgeous, sexy face, which I know you're missing by now. You're missing seeing me get all animated, move my arms everywhere, act like I'm swatting down ducks from the air or something, but, you know, you got to do what you got to do, and I want to go into the radio anyway, so it fits. I feel more natural. It's kind of weird just to stare at a camera the entire time. It's almost like having a 50-minute conversation where I am the only one talking and I'm making dead eye contact with someone the entire time. It's just weird. Speaking of weird, I saw a Subway commercial the other day, and this Subway commercial, or I was actually, let me back up for a second. Let me back up. I was talking to my roommate and one of his friends, who's turned into one of my friends, here at school, and we were talking about weird words. And I think the weirdest word that I've ever heard in a sentence, more than, say, once or twice, and the reason I say once or twice is because occasionally my mom will watch this U.S. Spelling Bee, and I'll hear these weird words used in context, and I have no idea what the hell they mean. But anyway, the weirdest word that I've heard used in context outside of a spelling bee is probably bequeath. It's strange. Like, I'm going to give you something. I'm going to bequeath this upon you. You know, it's strange. And the other day I was watching football on TV, and as you may know, Subway is a big sponsor of football, especially the NFL. But they do a little bit of sponsorship with college, too. And they mix commercials. Usually with football, they have, like, Subway, the training restaurant of fill-in-the-blank athlete here, fill-in-the-blank athlete here, and athletes everywhere with another athlete saying it. But this one, it was two guys, and you may have seen it. It was two guys sitting down, and one guy's, like, tweeting away. And that's a new thing with restaurant commercials now, where everybody has to tweet about everything. I don't understand it. It's like, don't tweet about the damn food, just eat it already. God! But anyway, this guy's tweeting, and he's like, hashtag this, and hashtag that, and hashtag this, and hashtag vinaigrette's a funny word, and the other guy just starts eating a sandwich. And I thought it was funny, but, you know, it's kind of annoying. Hashtags are annoying. And really, social media is partially annoying. But overall, bequeath is weird, vinaigrette is a weird word, and this was a weird week in sports. There were upsets like crazy, and it almost started Thursday. Miami goes to North Carolina. And Miami is one of those teams, they're ranked high. They're not a great team by any stretch of the imagination. They're overrated, but you can't fault them for being overrated because they technically haven't lost. It's kind of like Kansas City. They're technically listed in like everybody's power rankings as the best team in the NFL. Everybody knows they're not. But right now you can't argue against them because they're the only team that hasn't lost. Miami's kind of a similar way, you know. It's kind of like the argument with Missouri, which I'll get to later. You know, Miami, they're not a great team, but they haven't lost. So you can't really fault them and say, well, we're not going to rank you high and we're going to put all these one-loss teams ahead of you, or even two-loss teams who actually may, in actuality, be better, but they haven't lost yet. So you have to put them ahead since they're playing good competition and they're just barely squeaking out wins, but they are winning. In this case, they barely squeaked out a win against a North Carolina team that is just awful. I mean, for North Carolina football, this is one of the worst North Carolina football teams ever. It just is. Okay, and I don't need to get into it. 20 seconds of research on ESPN, type in UNC football, and you'll just see it for yourself. Pick a random stat, I don't care. Punting yards, kick return yards, turnover margin, quarterback completion percentage, running something. I don't care. Just whatever. Whatever you want to look at. North Carolina's terrible, and we all know it. We all know that Miami is not accustomed to beating teams by a lot of points. But we all figured that it would not take a last-second drive and a 2-yard run after a 4-interception day by a quarterback who's been pretty good all through the season to actually win the game. But that's what it came down to. And the craziness almost started there. But Miami survived. Miami survived. The Hurricanes survived. They may not survive sanctions, but they survived North Carolina. Then Friday comes. And Friday, Louisville played Central Florida. Now, we all knew that Central Florida was one of two things. They were either A, the benefactor of looking like a good team against an overrated South Carolina team, or B, they were a good team. And they were Central Florida was Louisville's toughest test up to this point. And I think both of them were true. But I lean more toward the first one. I'm not a believer in South Carolina. I'm really not. And so when South Carolina won by 10 on the road at Central Florida, I pretty much had the attitude of, well, Central Florida might be a decent team, but South Carolina's not that good. They lack a lot of offensive firepower. So I'm not really going to pay much attention. Louisville's still going to blow them out of the water. I still said, Louisville's going to make a statement game today. The morning of the game, I posted on Twitter, I said, Louisville's going to make a statement game. Teddy Bridgewater's going to account for 5 touchdowns. And Louisville's going to roll 41-14. That was my prediction. And for the first 2 quarters, a little bit over that, I looked like a freaking genius. Because Louisville was up 28-7. They were cruising to a victory. And then, lo and behold, they just fall apart. And in basketball, what you see when a team starts falling apart is they settle. They start settling for jump shots or something, or they get sloppy with the ball. In football, what I see more and more, though, is when a team settles, they just quit trying. Okay, it's kind of like the football team here at Lindsey Wilson, where I go. Is they have such an immensely talented football team, and then they'll come out the third quarter, they'll be completely flat for whatever reason, just emotionally somewhere else. I call it Terrence Jones syndrome. And teams get back in the game. And then Lindsey usually has to fight to win at the end. That's what usually happens. Well, in Louisville's case, that's what happened. But here's what we all realized. Central Florida is too good for that. Central Florida is too good to give them any kind of momentum. Because what we saw was Central Florida scored 24 straight points, get a lead. Louisville finally got back in the game, got a touchdown, and then Central Florida comes back on what's supposed to be one of the best defenses in the country and scores a game-winning drive at Louisville to virtually end any kind of minute chance of getting to the BCS championship game at all. It's over. It's done. And not only is that done, but my tenure on the Louisville bandwagon is done. At least for this year. Everything. Teddy Bridgewater being the Heisman, done. I no longer believe it. Louisville being the second best team in the country, done. No longer believe it. I am off the bandwagon, folks. I am done. Because anytime you score anytime you go up 28-7 at home on a nationally televised game with a quarterback who's supposed to be a Heisman candidate and a defense that's supposed to be one of the best in the country, playing Central Florida, there is no reason at all that you should lose that game. Other than your entire team just falls down and dies. Like literally dies on the field. Everybody collapses. And yet that's what happened. They didn't collapse and die. That would have been less embarrassing. But they may as well have. Their energy died. Their drive died. Their ability to go out and win a game just ended. And it was shameful. It was awful. And I'm off the bandwagon. I'm done. They'll still win the American Athletic Conference. I have no doubt about that. Then again, I had no doubt about them running the table, and look what happened. So I don't know. They may not even do that. I don't know. I'm confused at this point. I am blown away by how wrong I was about this team. But that was not the end of the craziness. Saturday comes. And everybody said they were looking forward to what was going to be Clemson and Florida State, what was going to be one of the best games in ACC history. And I'll get to that in a moment. Because that was a night game. And that was the best game of the day. And I like saving the best for last. A lot of people are going to make a big deal out of LSU losing to Ole Miss. Now, the big deal is this. This is LSU's second loss. So their chances of getting to a BCS championship game are probably over at this point. Especially considering you still have Texas A&M, which is going to be a tough test. And you still have Alabama, which is going to be a tough test on the schedule. So, I mean, even if they won both of those games, they still may not get in. Because you have to have a crazy year altogether for a two-loss team to get in. And you can say, well, LSU did it a couple of years ago. I get that, but remember, West Virginia and Pittsburgh were number 1 and number 2, and they just both happened to lose in that last week. Sorry. You know, circumstances just have to be perfect. So that's probably not going to happen. But a lot of people are going to make a big deal about LSU actually losing to Ole Miss. I don't. Ole Miss is a great team. They're a young team, but they're a great team. They have a great game-managing quarterback in Bo Wallace. I almost called him Bo Jackson. That's 30 years ago. They have one of the best wide receiving cores in the country. I never can remember that freshman's name, but my God, he can make some catches. Some of the strongest hands I've ever seen in my life. So a loss against Ole Miss is not shameful. It's not shameful. They should have won the game, sure. But it was on the road. Ole Miss is hungry to make a statement this year. And, you know, that's not a shameful loss. That's really not. what is a shameful loss is Texas A&M losing to Auburn. That's a shameful loss. You're at home, first off. You have the Heisman winning quarterback, who had a phenomenal day, by the way. I'm not faulting Johnny Manziel for losing this game at all. But in the history of me watching the SEC, which is from 1998 on, outside of one Kentucky defense that was just so royally bad at tackling it wasn't even funny, this is the worst defense I have ever seen in the SEC. I believe someone needs to tell them, set them down, get a psychological evaluation, and see if this team scientifically believes that you can tackle someone by grabbing the top of both of their shoulder pads and just turning them around a little bit. Because anybody with a brain will tell you that you can't do it. And yet, all of Texas A&M does it. I swear they think they're playing two-hand touch. If they were playing two-hand touch football, they would be the greatest team because they're a fast defense. They're a blazing fast defense. But they can't even gang tackle because in order to gang tackle, at least one person on your team has to know how to tackle. And they don't know how. It's pitiful. I don't know where these guys are getting picked up. I don't know where they played. I don't know what their stat line looked like in high school. I don't care. Someone tell these guys, honestly, you have to tackle because giving up 45 points to Auburn is shameful. It's just shameful. Another top 10 team that lost, UCLA. They were 9th ranked. I said they were going to win this game against Stanford. I legitimately believe still that they are the better team than Stanford. But here's the thing. This was the first major test for UCLA. They've got a very young team. And a lot of people forget that Brett Hundley is still a sophomore. And they're without Jordan James. And I think that loss of Jordan James is bigger than a lot of people recognize. Because when I watched them play against Nebraska, which was also a road game, that second half, I mean, Brett Hundley was so relaxed. And part of it was because he is a legitimately good quarterback. I do believe that. But part of it is because he knew he had someone he could rely on in the backfield. And I just don't believe he thinks he has that anymore. And when you have a young quarterback or any quarterback who does not believe he can rely on his backfield, then that's going to weigh heavily on the quarterback's performance and the team's performance as a whole. Look at the Giants. Look at the New York Giants. They're a good team. They're not a great team. They're a talented team, though. But they don't have a running game. And Eli Manning has to do all these things by himself. And I feel like Brett Hundley feels like he has to do the same thing a lot of the time, where he has to do everything himself. And when you put that much pressure on a sophomore who's never played in an environment like this, in a game of this magnitude, it's safe to say we probably should have seen a struggle coming. I was probably foolish to take UCLA in this game, but I was so impressed by the way he carried himself. And there's been some young guys that have had success in the past. Look at Johnny Manziel, winning at Alabama last year. That, I guess I had too much faith in him. That's really the assumption. I didn't overrate him because he's still a very good quarterback. But I had too much faith in him in this particular game. But the game that everybody's been talking about as far as college is concerned is Clemson and Florida State. And I made it a point that I was going to watch this game. And the reason I made it a point, I did not get to watch much football Saturday. I agreed, and this is one of the worst decisions I have ever made in my life. I agreed to sell my soul, aka I sold my Saturday, for $100 to film a band competition. And in so doing, I missed games like Texas A&M Auburn or UCLA Stanford. And it's high school band, and high school band is really boring. I'm $100 richer. That's going to fill up my gas tank a couple of times. So I guess I can't complain too much. At least I got paid for it. I did someone a favor. That makes me feel a little good, I guess. Looking back, I would have stayed back. But anyway, I made it a point, no matter how miserable I was going to be after filming the high school band competition, I was going to sit down and watch the entire Clemson and Florida State game. That was going to be my treat on me, regardless of what I had to do for school. I was going to make it a point to watch this game, and I did. Up until about the fourth quarter. And the reason why I quit watching was after that first 40 minutes of that game, you saw everything you needed to see. And really looking back, I saw everything I needed to see in this game before the game even started. Because Jimbo Fisher, the head coach of the Florida State Seminoles, agreed to let ABC put a camera in the locker room of the Seminoles before the game started. That's something that not many coaches do, especially on the college level and especially before the game starts. But he did. Now here's what I'm thinking, okay? 5th ranked Florida State is at 3rd ranked Clemson. There's so many implications on the line here. You're talking front runner for the ACC, obviously. Dark horse candidate behind Alabama and Oregon for the BCS championship, obviously. You're talking about a statement game. This is one of the biggest ACC games, one of the most hyped ACC games, and probably the best game this year and the best game that ACC has ever seen. And so, when I'm watching in the locker room, I am looking for one thing and one thing only. I'm not looking for the coach to get up and say anything. I'm not looking for a specific play. I'm not looking for a specific battle strategy. I am looking for one player to get up and address his team as a leader. As the leader of this football team. Address his team and say, we are going to get a win tonight in the most hostile environment in the country in Death Valley against the 3rd ranked team in the country that's undefeated with one of the best quarterbacks in the country in Taj Boyd. And that guy was Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston said all that. Allow that to sink in for a second. You've got all of that going on with the game. All of it. Okay? You have to have your leader. You have to have your leader give this pregame speech. There is no other way to do it. And your leader is a guy who's only starting for the 7th time in his career, who is a freshman, and who has never played a game of this capacity in this scenario in his life. And yet he was the one that gave that speech and said, brothers, we are going to get a win. It's paraphrasing a little bit, but that's basically what he said. And that blew my mind. That a freshman on a team like Florida State, in this scenario, in a game that meant this much, with this much publicity, and with this much on the line, that a freshman would give that kind of a speech. And yet, the team would let him give that kind of a speech, and they would let him say the things that he said, and they would respond to it. And yet, all of that happened. That is a massive gamble, because guess what happens if you let the entire country, think about what's on the line here. If you let the entire country see your locker room and a redshirt freshman in his 7th career start in a game of this magnitude that he's never played in before give that kind of an address, and then if he goes out and absolutely screws that game up, and the emotion of the game gets to him, and he doesn't play well, and he shows chinks in his armor, and they don't win, and they get blown out on the road, and he doesn't look like himself, then you look like, you Jimbo Fisher and you Florida State look like idiots for letting a freshman give that kind of a speech. And for letting him basically self-declare himself as the leader in that scenario. But if you're right, and if he goes out and he actually wins, and if he dominates, and if he proves to us that he is the best quarterback in the country, then you look like geniuses. You're like Joe Namath declaring that he's going to win, the guarantee. Against impossible odds, we're going to go out and we're going to win the Super Bowl. And we're going to go out and we're going to win this game against the 3rd-ranked team in the country in the most hostile environment in this scenario, with all this on the line, with a true or redshirt freshman quarterback who's never played in this kind of a scenario. We're going to let him be the leader. We're going to let him declare himself the leader. We're going to let the team respond in that sort of way, and we're just going to let the dominoes fall where they may. And just like Joe Namath, if they don't come through, then they're the laughingstock. But if they do it, then just like Joe Namath, they look incredible. And people will talk about this game for years to come. And that's exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened. They go out. Jameis Winston has a career day, throws 24 of 34, 444 yards, 4 touchdowns. He had 1 pick because of miscommunication with a wide receiver one time. One time, the 80,000 crazy fans in Death Valley got to him. That was it. That was the only flaw. And they dominated the 3rd-ranked team in the country on the road in Death Valley and ended up winning 51-14. And because of that, Jameis Winston has solidified himself as the best quarterback in the country. And I am going to go ahead and do something that I don't do a lot. I make a lot of predictions. I don't make a lot of guarantees. I am going to guarantee something right here and now. I am going to personally guarantee that Jameis Winston will win the Heisman this year. I'm going to take it a step further. I am going to guarantee that Jameis Winston will win the Heisman this year. I am going to guarantee that Florida State will trump Oregon and get into the BCS championship game. And I am going to guarantee that in the final installment of the BCS, that Florida State will take down whatever SEC powerhouse they face, and they will win the BCS championship and host the Crystal Ball. Hoist it. So there. Florida State's the best team in the country. They have the best player in the country. They are going to win it all. But speaking of the BCS, I have been known for my hatred of the BCS. It is a flawed system that should have never existed in the first place. Well, at least not past like the first 5 years of its existence. Because back in the day, usually, there were only one or two really good teams. There was a great divide between the two good teams and the rest. And you only needed a system that was going to come up with the best two teams in the country. That was it. That's all you needed. But now, you have teams like Alabama and Florida State and Oregon and Ohio State, who could all make a case for being the best team in the country. Now, I've already said I know who the best team in the country is. But they could all make a case. They could all make a logical case. Would they be right? One of them would. But here's one of the things that I hate about the BCS, and it's something that's not talked about a lot, and I didn't even think about it until this week. Because the new BCS standings were released, and I have them right here. And Florida State, after winning, jumped Oregon. Now, here is the thing. Do I know that Florida State is better than Oregon? Yes, I do. I know that. And I'm not saying I know it because I'm trying to be cocky. I'm not. It's just after watching how they dominated Clemson in that kind of environment, I know it. It's common knowledge. Florida State is better than Oregon, but here's the thing. Oregon has been the undisputed number 2 team in the country all throughout the season. And just like Miami, how they haven't lost, it's tough to say that as far as a ranking is concerned, Florida State should be better than Oregon. Because we all know by now that it's not ranking the best teams in the country, it's ranking the better teams in the country based on what they've done. It's not best as far as talent or team content. It's best as far as result. Oregon's been pretty good, folks. They don't have a blemish on their record. It's not even close. They're dominating teams. It doesn't matter who they play. So can you fault them then just because Florida State happened to beat Clemson? Okay, here's the thing. I'm not contradicting myself by saying that Oregon should be ranked higher than Florida State, even though I think Florida State's better, because we all know by now that ranking does not determine the best team. It determines the best result of the teams who are available. Okay, do you honestly believe that the NCAA tournament picks the 68 best teams in the country? No! No, they don't. They pick the 68 teams with the best results. That's why these conference champions get in. Okay? It's not because they're the best team available, no. You honestly think Lamar is better than like an Oklahoma? If you honestly believe that, go to an asylum right now and never show your face on this earth again. Just don't do it. Okay, if you honestly believe that the NCAA tournament picks the 68 best teams, then just, I don't know what you should do. You should do something to yourself. You should do something to yourself. A rank does not determine the best team. It determines the best team based on the result. Okay? So, I'm looking at these at these standings, these BCS standings. And Alabama's number 1, obviously. Florida State's number 2. Now, here's one thing that I hate about the BCS that not a lot of people talk about. Okay, it is the fact that the BCS standings do not come out until like halfway through the season. Here's why I hate that. Is because so much of the rank is influenced by what is done from week 6 on. And we saw it right here. If Clemson had lost to Florida State like this back in week 3 and we had had the same result the rest of the season, then Oregon would still probably be number 2. But because Florida State beat Clemson at this moment, now granted they beat them pretty badly, but because they beat them at this moment in time, and then the BCS standings came out for the first time the very next day, that's why they're number 2. Again, it's the result. It's the result at that particular time. And pretty much what the BCS does inherently is it discards the first 6 weeks of the season unless you've just done something that's awful. Like what Louisville did by losing to Central Florida. Or having a terrible strength of schedule. And, you know, you can say a myriad of other things why we all hate the BCS. I mean, I'm looking at the top 10 now. Alabama, Florida State, Oregon, Ohio State. I have no problem with that so far. Then you have number 5, Missouri. Again, rank is not a testament to how good you are. It's how good your results are. Missouri hasn't lost. I do get that. One thing that I hate about the BCS, though, is the computer vote. And the computer vote does not give any credit at all to how the team looks. Or how the team plays or performs in any number of situations. It just looks at, oh, final score, 1 loss, boom. In a computer's eyes, Clemson losing to Florida State 51-14 looks the exact same. I'm not making this up. Clemson, that would look the exact same as Clemson losing on a last-second field goal. Now, the human vote, the human polls, they take all of that into consideration. But, you know, a system like the BCS with a computer system works in something like the NFL because, you know, you have so few games a season that all you need to do is determine who won more or who lost more because you're playing the same teams. In college, you're not playing the same teams. Oregon's not going to have anywhere close to the same schedule as Florida State. That's why you have to grade them based on their performance, not the result. And that's why, as of now, Oregon should still be ranked higher than Florida State. Again, I'm not contradicting myself. Because rank is not a statement of how good you are. It's a statement of the result, or should be a statement of the result. And Oregon has had perfect results. And because of that, they should be ranked higher than Florida State. Because they started that way. But because of, you know, because of the fact that BCS standings don't come out until 6 weeks in or 7 weeks in or however long we are in the season, that's why you see Florida State that's ahead of Oregon. Now, there's a myriad of other things that I could say that's wrong with the BCS. I'm not going to get into that because it's the last year. Thanks be to God, we can get rid of this terrible, terrible atrocity known as the BCS. And we can just go away. We can just say, go away. And we have a 13-person committee picking 4 teams, and I cannot possibly be more excited. Can you imagine how great a 4-team playoff would be this year? Because probably what would end up happening is Missouri's going to lose sometime, so they wouldn't be in. Ohio State, I don't think, is good enough to be in. Alabama's probably going to run the table. Oregon's going to run the table. Florida State will probably run the table. My fourth pick would be Baylor. So you'd have Alabama playing Baylor and Florida State playing Oregon. But what would probably happen is Alabama plays Ohio State and Florida State playing Oregon. Those two matchups on a neutral field, oh my God. You talk about a sexy couple of matchups. Because you have Alabama, who's got a winning quarterback, a winning coach, great preparation, a leaky defense that would play against Ohio State with a quarterback, dual threat guy in Braxton Miller who can just eat bad defenses alive. But then you have Alabama, who's used to beating teams like Ohio State, who's used to preparing for one-trick pony teams, who's used to shutting down guys like Braxton Miller. So basically, it would be Nick Saban versus Braxton Miller. And then you sprinkle in the fact that Urban Meyer is the head coach, a guy who used to coach at Florida, who used to coach against Nick Saban. That's sexy. And then Florida State and Oregon would just be awesome. Seeing Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston duke it out. Trying to see if Florida State's speedy defense can keep up with Mariota, with, oh my God, I'm losing, what is his name? I'm having a brain fart here, I'm sorry, but the Oregon running back, DeAnthony Thomas. There we go. That would be amazing. And then whoever won those games, that would be a great championship. The 4-year playoff was 1 year too late. Just like Cleveland coming back. If they had come back 1 year earlier, they could have gotten Peyton Manning. If we had gotten rid of the BCS 1 year earlier, we would have had just a great, great Final Four. But alas, we're going to have to wait one more year. One more year. So just bear through it. Bear through the BCS one more year. And then hopefully next year we have as great a year, if not better, in college football. I can't wait to see a playoff. I just can't. Even talk about it now, like I'm grinning from ear to ear just thinking about it. Because I've talked about this for years. Not on this show, obviously, but for years. About the evils of the BCS. I've looked it up. I've had speeches on it. I've written in newspapers about it. About how not just it's wrong, it's borderline unconstitutional. Wrong. And we're finally getting rid of it. And I cannot wait. But moving on. I talked about upsets. Perhaps the biggest upset, though, that happened this week. And we've moved on to Saturday. Sunday. Everyone talked about Denver and Indy. It was all I heard all week long. And I said two things about this weekend. I said, Jameis Winston's going to prove he's the best quarterback in college, and Peyton Manning's going to prove that he's the best quarterback in the NFL. I was right about both of them. But I was wrong about Peyton Manning in a sense. I believed he would come out and prove that he was the best quarterback on the field. The best quarterback player. He didn't do that. In fact, he looked pretty bad. in the game, at least for Peyton Manning. He proved he's the best quarterback for this sport, though. And you could tell he's coming back to his hometown. And he said before, I only wanted to play for 3 teams. He said one of them was his high school, one of them was Tennessee, and one of them was Indianapolis. And now he's coming back as an opponent to a stadium that was only built because he was good enough to ask for it and they gave it to him. He's coming back to a city that he pretty much molded into what it was. And you think about all of the great influences in sports that Indianapolis has had. You have Larry Bird as the general manager of the Pacers. You have the Pacers in general. I mean, guys like Reggie Miller and Paul George and Roy Hibbert. And then you have Colts, Edgerrin James, Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, Robert Mathis, Dwight Freeney. But there is no one that has influenced this town more than Peyton Manning. And he's coming back and he's playing as an opponent. And you could tell it just ate at him. He didn't look like himself. And honestly, I have more respect for a guy like Peyton Manning now, who let the emotion get to him, who lost a game because of the emotion, than if he had sucked it all up, had been a man about it, had kept his cool, and had won. I have more respect for him now that he allowed the emotion of the game to get the best of him one single time. Because in this instance, in this rare instance where he's going up against the team that he built, that he established, that he molded into what it was, and he was not able to come away with a win, that it meant so much to him, the emotion meant so much to him, that he was unable to overcome that and drive himself to victory, I can have more respect for that man as a quarterback than a quarterback who would just suck it all up and play cool and win the game. Now, in saying that, I still believe, without a doubt, that Denver is the best team in the country. They had this one flub. Just because I believe that they are the best team in the country does not mean I believe they are faultless. They are not. I recognize that they are without Ryan Clady, but oh my God, that offensive line is hideously awful. And some idiot somewhere is saying right now, Andrew Luck is better than Peyton Manning because in a head-to-head game they won. And that guy can shut his mouth. And I can look at that man straight in the eye and ask him if his ass is jealous of all the crap that's coming out of his mouth. Because that is stupid. Andrew Luck did not beat Peyton Manning. Okay? Andrew Luck played a whale of a game. He did. He did not allow the emotion to get to him. He did what every quarterback is trained to do, to go out and win. Andrew Luck's team beat Peyton Manning's team. This is not a rip on Andrew Luck. I love Andrew Luck. Phenomenal player. And perhaps one day will be close to as good as Peyton Manning. But you're not going to look me in the eye without me disrespecting you and with all sincerity telling me that Andrew Luck beat Peyton Manning, because that's just not how it happened. Here's what happened. Andrew Luck had twice as much time to throw the ball as Peyton Manning did, with the same amount of people on defense coming at him. Okay? The blind side of Peyton Manning, without Ryan Clady, you may as well not have a blocker there. Yeah, that's pretty much what you have now. You have a left tackle that legitimately can't block. It's kind of like the start of The Blind Side when Michael Orr's character, played by whoever, just doesn't block for like the first 2 snaps in that game in that movie. If you haven't seen the movie, see it once, just so you can say you've seen it. It wasn't that great. But, you know, it was... I'm not the kind of guy who gets tangled up in movies that play on people's emotions. You know, like Titanic is a good example. If anybody other than Tom Hanks played in Forrest Gump, I probably wouldn't like it. But Tom Hanks is just one of the best actors of all time. I'm not one that gets swept up in the emotion. Unless it's talking about something off topic, because I completely forgot where I was going with that. That train left the station, I guess. I don't remember where I was going with that train of thought. But anyway, oh yeah, Blindside. There we go, light bulb. Fall break is over. Anyway. Yeah, the blind side is completely unprotected. Robert Mathis still has a heck of a pass rushing game. He had a monster of a game. And in all honesty, he's probably the MVP. Just the amount of disruption that he was able to cause. Just unbelievable. But that offensive line is bad. Because the Indianapolis Colts, and it's not just in pass protection, Denver was not able to establish a running game at all. And I realize Noshawn Marino is not the best running back that ever walked the face of the earth, but my God, if you're going to play 2 safeties deep and either a nickel or dime package the entire game, you would better be able to run the football. And they weren't. 6 men in the box. That's all it took. Because Denver's running attack is predicated upon running up the middle. It just is. And then bouncing it to the outside if you have to. They're not a stretch running team. They're a team that runs it up the middle. It's not a power running game. But it's a run that's set up by the pass. It's designed to attack the middle of the defense that's expecting a pass. That's why you see all these shotgun draws and, you know, just basic halfback dives. It's not because they're a power running defense. It's because everybody's keying in on Peyton Manning. And so finally what Indianapolis did is, we're not going to let Peyton Manning beat us. We're going to make them beat us on the ground. And they couldn't do it. Now, granted, Peyton Manning did not look like himself. The emotion of the game got to him. He underthrew almost everything. Stuff came out funny. But all in all, there are a lot of concerns for this team on both sides of the ball. That passing defense, just pitiful. Just pitiful. Champ Bailey looked rusty. Then he got hurt. I'm not sure how long he's out. But even so, like, all of the passing defense just looked awful. And then you have stupid mistakes like Wilkinson chest bumping Andrew Luck in the end zone and giving them a first down. It's just unbelievable. But there are a lot of issues with this team. I still believe they are the best team in the country. They're not without issues. And Eric Allen of ESPN said it well, talking about their running game and their defense. He said they, meaning Denver, need to find a way to get a running back to hold on to the ball in crucial situations, and then defensively find a way to secure the passing defense. It's all about security. Ball control, ball control, ball control. But Tillman had a costly fumble. Holiday had a costly fumble. Peyton Manning had a costly fumble. Of course, that's because, his blind side wasn't protected. But still, ball control and the ability to guard the pass is just, it's not this team's strong point. And on the subject of strong points, a lot of teams lost a lot of theirs. Injuries. And there were two really big ones. The first one was Jay Cutler. And I'm not a huge fan of Jay Cutler. He strikes me as very arrogant, stuck up. Thinks he knows it all. Frankly, a lot better than he thinks, or he thinks he's a lot better than he actually is. Arrogant, cocky, overconfident. But the team is a lot better with him. They're a lot better with him. They're like 21-11 when he starts over the last, I forget how long it's been. 3 years. Something like that. And then they're like 1-6 when he doesn't. Because when he's in there, you can hand it off to guys like Matt Forte. Because teams aren't keying in on the run. And then you have a guy who can take advantage of having a Brandon Marshall type on the outside. But without him, you're in for a whale of trouble because suddenly, your backup quarterback is not good enough to beat a double coverage. And so everybody's in solo coverage, and they're all keying in on Matt Forte. So that makes your running game suffer, that makes your passing game suffer, and it makes your defense suffer because they're on the field more because your offense isn't able to move the ball as well. So that's a big loss. He's out 4 to 6 weeks. The bigger loss, though, this week, Reggie Wayne, out for the season, torn ACL. Now, here's the thing about a torn ACL. I realize that Adrian Peterson came back from a torn ACL and had one of the best running back seasons anybody's ever had. I get that. What we all need to understand is that Adrian Peterson is not the majority. At 26 years old, he tore his ACL, and he came back a season later, and he had one of the best seasons of his life. Because he was young, he's a workhorse, he's determined, and some people just recover quicker. Reggie Wayne is old. He tore his ACL at 34. It doesn't take a genius to know that it's going to take a 34-year-old longer to heal and rehab a torn ACL than it will a 26-year-old. Okay? Because his body's older and it's gone through more persecution. Reggie Wayne has started 189 consecutive games. 10 shy of Tim Brown's wide receiver record of 199 consecutive starts. He's been through a lot. And not only does he play in a lot of games, he's targeted a lot in those games. Over the last 2 seasons, he's the 3rd most targeted receiver in the country. Behind Brandon Marshall and Calvin Johnson. So he's older. He's played in more games. He's gone through more persecution. He's gone through more stuff with his body. He's not going to come back as strong. Okay, this is a long-term ouch for Indy. It's a long-term ouch. We're not talking about a little boo-boo where you put a Band-Aid on it and suddenly you come back like Superman the next year and run for over 2,000 yards. We are talking about what could potentially be the ending of a career as we know it. And that would be sad. I hope Reggie Wayne comes back because he's a phenomenal player. I like him as a player. I have a lot of respect for him as a player and as a person. I mean, he stuck it out in Indy. He could have easily left. Everybody else seemed to. The team just fell apart around him, and he stuck around. He said, nope, this is my hometown. I'm going to stick around. I'm going to see what this young guy can do. And then the third most targeted receiver over the last 2 years gets hurt and is out for the season. But a couple of good things about the NFL. RG3 finally looks like himself. After that miserable playoff performance last year, and after the horrendous start this year where he just looked like an average Joe that they picked up off the street, or any Cleveland Browns quarterback ever, he finally is beginning to look like himself. And I'm not talking about stats. He still does not look that great in the stat column. I get that. But he finally looks like himself. He's running at about 75 to 80% capacity on the scramble. His pass is looking a little bit closer to what it was. And I realize he's an accurate passer. I think we all overrated his ability to pass accurately just a little bit, though. Because think about it. When a guy is able to run, if you're a corner and you're trying to cover a receiver, and at the same time you know that the quarterback is able to, at any given time, just run like greased lightning down the field, you are going to play in a different manner than a guy who can't run as well. You're going to cover a little bit looser. You're going to be glancing at the quarterback. You're not going to be covering the receiver as closely. But because RG3 can't run as well, guys have been covering tighter, and that's why we're seeing more interceptions. But he's finally beginning to look like himself. And in an NFC East that's just absolutely terrible, they still have a shot to win this division. And they're obviously a second-half team. I mean, the start to this year is looking like the start to last year. It was awful. I mean, Mike Shanahan almost got ran out of town the first half of the season last year because he put all this faith into RG3, and the team didn't do squat. And then they won their last 7 games and got into the playoffs and won the division. They're obviously a second-half team. I haven't given up faith on them yet. And part of the reason why I haven't given up faith on them is because, honestly, a couple of the other teams in that division look really, really bad. Philadelphia's quarterback situation is in shambles. I'm not here to tell you that Michael Vick is the long-term solution for the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm not an idiot. What I am here to tell you is that we all saw that Nick Foles and Matt Barkley are not the answer to your quarterback situation at all. Nick Foles looked like a lost puppy on the field. He looked like a guy who was just picking up a football for the first time in his life, looked at it after every single snap, and asked, "What in the hell am I supposed to do with this?" And he proceeded to run around with his 4.9 40-yard time, looking like a turtle swimming through molasses, running around trying to get away from these speedy Dallas defenders, and then chuck it in a prayer that hopefully some guy in green would come down with it. And it didn't happen. And then Dallas did them a favor by giving the guy a concussion. Because he's that awful. So then you have Matt Barkley come in. And Matt Barkley was even worse. He threw 3 interceptions in the fourth quarter alone. Now, I get it that it's his first time playing in an actual NFL game for an extended period of time. But if you throw 3 interceptions against Dallas's defense, then the only quarterback that's worse than you is Brandon Weeden for throwing that stupid flip pass to the middle of godforsaken nowhere. And speaking of terrible passes and godforsaken nowhere, Monday Night Football. And I told my producer this. That game last night, that matchup between the Vikings and the Giants, that caliber of play, the caliber of teams in that game, had to be the single worst Monday Night Football game in the history of Monday Night Football. It just had to be. I can't think of any other game ever on Monday night that could possibly have been worse as far as the two teams playing each other than that one. And Scott Van Pelt, the poor guy, Tuesday morning, he's on ESPN, he's like, "Come on, guys. We all had to sit through this because it's our job, so we're going to show you the highlights of this game." And it was terrible. At least I called it. The Giants got their first win. So thanks be to God, they won't get the first draft pick and get another pass rushing defensive end because we all know that's exactly what they need. It's not like they have Justin Tuck and Jason Pierre-Paul or anything. Give Jadeveon Clowney to Jacksonville or Tampa Bay because God knows they need something. Yeah, the weekend was great. Friday was great. Thursday was great. The almost upset Thursday, the upset Friday, the upset mania Saturday, the emotion-filled game Sunday. Monday was just awful. Monday was just sucked. But anyway, that covers football. Kentucky plays Thursday. I'll get into that game more once I do the second show of this week. But on to baseball. And baseball, it's very uncommon that you see two teams in the World Series with the exact same regular season record. But that's what we're seeing. We're seeing St. Louis, who's 97-65, against Boston, who's 97-65. Now, the routes taken were a little different. St. Louis, as per St. Louis style, barely got out of the NLDS, winning 2 games, the last 2 games of that series against the Pittsburgh Pirates to move on. Boston beat the heck out of Tampa Bay. Just completely showed their dominance. Then St. Louis plays the Dodgers, shuts down their offense, It was amazing. Like, the Dodgers came in as one of the hottest offenses in baseball, and they just couldn't do anything. And then to top it off, they lit up one of the best pitchers in the country, if not the best pitcher in the country, in Clayton Kershaw. Just absolutely beat him to a pulp. Meanwhile, Boston flexes its muscle against Detroit, proves it has the best pitching staff in the playoffs by shutting down one of the best offenses in the playoffs. So you've got St. Louis, who's a team on offense who can explode at any time, with a couple of pitchers that have been virtually unhittable. How about the performance from Michael Wacha so far? The rookie just completely unfazed by the situation. Virtually unhittable over the last couple of months. Definitely unhittable in the playoffs. You have Adam Wainwright, who's already amazing. You have a bullpen that's great. Against Boston, who's got the best playoff closer in the country, if not the best closer in the country. One of the most consistent and deepest starting rotations in the country. And an offense that can light you up from anywhere. So this is going to be an amazing World Series. I'm going to take the Red Sox in 6. And it's not that I think that they're that much better than St. Louis. It's just I think, as I've said, well-rounded teams succeed in the playoffs. Well-rounded teams succeed in the playoffs. They're more well-rounded than St. Louis, and that's why they're going to win in 6 games, I believe. I'm not going to guarantee that, but that's my prediction. An interesting side note, and it's not really a side note, it has major implications. Jim Leyland, or however you say his name, Detroit's manager, longtime manager in Major League Baseball, longtime manager for the Detroit Tigers, amassed over 1,700 wins in his career, decided to resign. I haven't been a fan of baseball long enough to fully appreciate what he's done to this sport. But any player that I've ever heard talk about him, they just have nothing but respect for the guy. Nothing but respect for the man. The man as an individual, the man as what he's done to the sport, what he's done for the sport. Just an all-around class act. And you like seeing guys like that. I mean, every sport, sure, it needs its Spitfires. It needs its guys that don't listen to what anybody says. The Yasiel Puigs, the Kobe Bryants of this world. But ultimately, for the longevity of the sport, you need guys like Jim Leyland around. And when they resign or retire, it's kind of saddening. It really is. It really is. As far as Detroit's concerned, they'll be fine. They've got 2 of the best starting pitchers in the country, Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer. They've got a couple of the best power hitters in the country, Miguel Cabrera, Prince Fielder. Miguel Cabrera is also a pretty good hitter, period. You can say what you want about Prince Fielder disappearing in the playoffs. I still don't think he's that used to playing in the playoffs. You know, he came from Milwaukee. But anyway, I have the Red Sox in 6. They'll be fine as an organization. The Tigers will, though. It probably won't happen. A good fit for them, honestly, as far as a replacement manager is concerned, would be Dusty Baker. And I know Dusty Baker got a lot of flack at Cincinnati. I didn't like a lot of it. I thought some of it was just, people taking out anger on him when really they just had an inconsistent team. I think, though, the major fault with Dusty Baker is he has no idea how to use a bullpen. And they don't have a bullpen, so it's fine. It's perfectly fine. He won't get it, though. Speaking of, Brian Price was named the new manager of the Reds. I think it's a good fit. He's the pitching coach. They've got a phenomenal pitching crew. One thing that I hope he does, I hope he coaches up Tony Cingrani into a starting pitcher at the major league level. Makes him a great pitcher at this level. Gets rid of Bronson Arroyo because Bronson Arroyo is way too inconsistent for my liking. You can't have Bronson Arroyo, Homer Bailey, and Mike Leake in the same starting rotation because it's just going to wear down your bullpen because at any given time they can just all collapse. But anyway, that's what I hope he does. He'll be fine. He'll be fine. He's been with this team before. And finally, it's getting to that point where everybody's talking about college basketball around here. And I'll be honest, I'm a football fan first, basketball fan second, so it kind of pisses me off a little bit. But I can understand, the Bluegrass State getting excited about their hoops. One thing I will never understand, though, is the hype surrounding Big Blue Madness. Let me rephrase that. I have no problem with someone getting all up in arms about Big Blue Madness. I realize it's a spectacle, but listen, Mike Keith, I met with him over the summer. Me and a couple of people from Western Kentucky went down to Nashville and talked with him. And he told us there are 3 stages of fans. There are the diehard analytical fans like me, the statistical freaks. That's stage 3. Stage 1 is just the people that love the spectacle of the sport. And then in the middle, there's a mix of the two. There's people that are diehard about one team and just love the spectacle of everything else. I am obviously, given the fact that I am a statistical freak, in the 3rd category. Big Blue Madness appeals to the 1st and 2nd category. So it doesn't appeal to me at all. But I've had people, when I say I don't like Big Blue Madness, they're like, oh, you're not a Kentucky basketball fan then. Screw you! I am as much a basketball fan, if not more so, than you, because I realize it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what dance the women's basketball coach does. It doesn't matter how much of an idiot Matthew Mitchell makes of himself. That has nothing to do with my fanhood of Kentucky basketball, so just stop it. Just stop it. It's like people trying to say Andrew Luck is better than Peyton Manning. Just shut up. Do the world a favor. Stop polluting the air. Focus on some college basketball news that actually matters, like Shane Bohannon getting suspended indefinitely. Now, he'll probably be back some point in the season. It's not been said what he actually did, but Shane Bohannon's a troubled kid. Okay? And this frustrates me, okay? I don't know that much about this story, so I'm not going to speculate. What I will say is this. Shane Bohannon is a phenomenal player, a phenomenal athlete. But he's in a whale of trouble. He's a repeated offender. Maybe not of the same crime, but a repeated offender. And I've said it before, back when Johnny Manziel was going through all that trouble. I hate it when guys pretty much throw away what could be a great career for, at best, what will be a mediocre one. Because unless Shane Bohannon gets his act on track, he's going to be a red flag. And people are always going to question his dedication to the sport because of his off-the-court issues. Shane Bohannon's a phenomenal player, folks. And if he ever realized that, oh my God, he would be a phenomenal player at the next level, at this level. Especially at this level. But even at the next, because he's got phenomenal potential. But just like Johnny Manziel, he's choosing to throw at least part of that potential away. To not get as high up the ceiling as he could be. As high up the wall to the ceiling as he could be. Because he's making stupid decisions. And I hope that he realizes before it's too late just how much of an impact that his choices make. And we can all take a lesson from that. We can all take a lesson from that. But anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox. I'm actually going to get out of here. I have class pretty soon. It's been fun. Let me know what you think of the pure audio thing. I love it personally, but if you all hate it, then, you know, there's not really any point. Because after all, it's about giving you all something that you can enjoy. So just give me some feedback. Let me know. I'll keep you posted on when the show's coming up next. Should have one again later in the week. But until next time, I will see you around. Thank you for joining me.